Hey there, everybody. Welcome so much to the PiXL Drone Show with another episode. And this time we're going to be talking about the Countering CCP Drones Act because, like you guys, we can't get enough of this, obviously. So today we have Lewis and Bobby here. And rather than introducing them, I'm going to hand it over, starting with Bobby first. Bobby, can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you're doing in the drone industry for us.
Sure. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Skybrowse. We launched the platform. Well, we started working on the platform about 8 years ago, launched the platform 4 years ago. Essentially, it's the easiest and fastest 3D modeling solution out there. And we're primarily focused on public safety with over 1,200 public safety agencies using Skybrowse right now across the US as well as the world. So basically, you just get a video, upload it to our system, and you get a 3D model out of it. So we're pretty entrenched in the drone industry because for accident investigation, tactical applications, as well as mission pre-plans, Skybrowse just makes it really easy to upload any video from either a drone or a cell phone or a GoPro into our system, and you get a 3D model back in just a couple of minutes.
Awesome. Well, it's good to know that you have such a strong relationship with a lot of first responders, because we're definitely going to be talking about that today. Lewis, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Louis Figueredo. I'm a detective with the Elizabeth Police Department in New Jersey, and big drone advocate. I've been doing a lot of things with, especially with DJI drones for the last decade. And I'm also Bobby's only best friend. So that's why I'm here to support him.
Oh, it's...
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's dive right into it. The Countering CCP Drone Act. What was your first reaction? And either one of you guys can start if you want. What was the first reaction when you understood that this was potentially serious and might actually make its way and become law?
I think we could start off with last year. Well, 2 years ago, there's just been rumors, a lot of rumors of DJI getting banned. And there were some stirrings in the background. And I remember talking to Chief Baker, who works at DJI. He's their director of public policy now, but back then he was their director of public safety. And he was telling me how other drone companies out there have been lobbying against DJI and trying to get them banned. So that's when it started last year, and I think it definitely impacts not just my company, but a lot of people in this industry where all of a sudden public safety can't use DJIs. Public safety might not be able to use AUTELs. That's most drones that they fly. So all of that gets grounded. And if they can't fly those drones, then it's going to be harder to map out a car crash with Skybrowse, or map out a stadium or a high school for active shooter pre-plans. All of a sudden, doing all of that becomes significantly more challenging and significantly more expensive. So over the past year, last summer, we released universal upload, so you can upload any video into our system. So it's not limited to certain drone brands, and it's just like a precaution on our end, just in case something bad does happen. But I'm sure from a public safety standpoint, Louis, as an end user, you can speak more about how this ban can affect your agency as well.
Yeah, I think the signs were there. They've been there for years. I think we were kind of like, everybody was just hoping that it wouldn't get to this point. And I think a lot of the proactive stuff we could have done, we could have started years ago. But I think it was kind of one of those, like, I don't think it's ever going to happen, right? Because we can go back 2 years ago when that internal memo was released, and hey, should we be concerned about DJI stealing our information, right? And then that led to what? It led to the federal agencies all pulling out, right? So then it wasn't allowed to, if you're a federal agency, you weren't allowed to buy DJI, right? And then then the next step went to the purchasing of the DJI equipment, right? So now you can use federal funds to purchase the equipment, right? And that applied to state and municipal departments, right? So they kind of started off, small. We'll pull it away from the federal agencies, then we'll pull the funding away, right? So now you can't use grant money to buy it. Yeah. Then, then we saw, then the next move was Florida, right? And then some parts of Tennessee and Texas, and they started slow again, right? And I think they kind of got frustrated because they didn't get much traction going from state to state, right? Because you saw that momentum kind of like stopped fairly quick, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's just go to, let's go federal again. And now let's try to have the federal government impose, these strict rules on DJI and, potentially ban them, and nobody can buy the equipment, enterprise or, regular recreational flyers, right? And I think You know, and like Bobby said, there's certain companies. Listen, I have people that know me. I have no filter. I have no issue saying that, you know, this is orchestrated mainly by Brink and Skydio, right? And the most recent example is, let's go back to December, where Skydio goes and they hire a lobbying firm out of New York, right? They're paying these lobbyists, right, to do whatever they do, right, in New York. And then we wait, what, like 2 months, two and a half months later, and then we have Congresswoman Stefanik do the proposal, the FR proposal, like, and then you look deeper into it, and one of Skydio's employees, right, was part of her was part of her cabinet the year before, like government affairs or something like that, like. And that's the most frustrating part. The writings, it's all there, it's all visible. Yeah. They don't even care to hide it, right? They don't even care to hide it, and then. You know, and then it's us, the end users, right? Or, you know, companies like Skybrowse that depend on DJI equipment that are going to end up by suffering.
Yeah. Do you, I think I've seen numbers that in the world of first responders, as many as 90% of them, the ones that use drones, actually fly DJI drones. Is it that big a number? Do you know?
I would think so. It would probably be up in the 90 something percent. Or
I think the 90%. Yeah, the 90% number came from that letter between drone responders and LIDA and APSA. They said that 90% of public safety agencies would be affected by this, which is kind of ironic in a way because she pretends that she's trying to save first responders, but it turns out that they feel like it's going to hurt them more than being saved at this stage. And of course, there's two bills, right? We talk about the most current one, which is the one that has gone the furthest right now, which is the CCP, the Countering CCP Drones Act. But there's also the DFR, aptly named DFR bill, which is really not as far as we think at this stage, but would also have quite the effect. So, Louis, can you maybe talk about the data? So it's all about the data. And I just had a discussion on LinkedIn with a person that supposedly is close to the data thing and the problem and knows what the data is. And we just reported this morning that a group of people are asking for the proof that the government has against DJI to be made public, because right now it's technically not made public. So we don't really know officially, other than looking at people that are leaking some data, what the problem is. Can you guys talk about this and maybe what you know about what the data is that's being supposedly leaked and that's a national security threat?
I don't. That's a tough one, Greg, because there hasn't been any proof, right? By these claims that have been leaked as far as what, you know, they're taking. What could they possibly take? User information, emails, right? Location services, right? GPS, stuff like that, right? But the problem is what they're claiming and what they're convincing with these politicians is that, you know, they're taking everything from videos to photos to your GPS location, right? What I like to tell people is, you know, I get that a lot where they're like, oh, you know, but it's sensitive information. I'm like, well, I'm not flying the drones for the CIA. You know, we're not doing top level secret stuff here. You know, we're flying it in a municipal setting. That's what people need to realize, that the majority of the public safety end users, right, we're using it in a setting where it doesn't really affect national security, right? We're not doing anything that could potentially go back to China and that they can't even find on Google Maps, right? Like you can pull up all that stuff, right? The location. So and for people that are that paranoid about, you know, hey, they can possibly be taking stuff from my flight logs or whatever, then you shut off data services, right? You shut everything off and you fly, you know, with no internet connection, nothing, right? The drone's still going to perform the same if you're that, you know, paranoid about it. Or you can use, you know, DroneSense app. You know, there's other apps out there that you can use the drone, right? So you're not using the pilot app.
isn't all of the data that you guys collect with the drone, your flight path, are you also required to share that publicly? I know some public safety agencies have to do that. I think the Chula Vista in California, they have a program where you can log online. I don't know if it's still active, but it was back then when we interviewed them, where you can actually go and log in and see all of the data that they collect, not the photos or the videos, but at least the flight path that the drone flew. Are you required to do that, Louis, as well?
No, we're not. All that data is saved, but we don't publicize it to the extent that Chula Vista was doing.
Would I be able to FOIA request that data? Do you know?
Everything can be requested, right?
Yeah. So
I think you're right. I think Chula Vista indeed, and I think they still do actually. They publicize all the drone flights because there's a big discussion, of course, about privacy and whether these drones flying over the city record things that they really shouldn't be recording. So in order to combat that, they would make all those drone flights public.
Well, what I was going to say, as far as because Greg, I guess you're asking about DFR, right? So as far as like our DFR flights, when the drone launches until it gets to the location, the camera's aimed at the horizon, so it's not looking down, filming anything, anybody's backyard, anything like that. It's going out to a call. It's not like, hey, let's send the drone up and let's go find something, right? That's not what's happening, right? So it's the camera's always aimed at the horizon. When it gets to the location, that's when the pilot can aim the camera down, look at the scene, and then when they RTH or the drone comes back, same thing, it's aimed at the horizon. So it's not recording anybody's backyard. It's doing nice landscape shots, right? But that's about it.
And also, I want to mention the cost-benefit analysis of drones for public safety compared to sharing that information. So earlier this week, I was training a police department, and they were showing me some of their use cases. They were flying hotels at the time, and it was a drunk guy somewhere in the United States, passed out in his car, and he was holding an AK-47 with his hand on the trigger, passed out. So they had to send the entire SWAT team over, and they essentially flew a drone basically right at the window just to ensure that the guy was still asleep and he wasn't going to wake up and get startled and start shooting like that. So think of all the lives it could have saved just by making a radio call out saying, oh, this guy just woke up, just be careful. Something as simple as that. And, even if that video was leaked online, it would just show up on like TikTok or like a subreddit for crazy videos or Live Leak or something like, oh, wow, that's crazy. But it's not going to impact data security of like a police department or anything like that to the extent that people are claiming.
Even if we backtrack, right? I know I was talking about the whole lobbying thing in New York and how Stefanik came out with that proposed bill, right? If you look at the timeline, do you think she had any time to research it or do her due diligence into whatever these claims were made, right? No, because if you look at, you're talking about, did she go out to public safety agencies in New York? And I know a bunch of them that and we're not even talking about New York City. I'm referring to like upstate New York, right? There's a bunch of departments up there with drones, right? Drone programs. Do you think she went out and said, hey, let me go investigate this. Let me go ask the end users what's going on, right? I'm absolutely not. She didn't.
I don't believe that at all. I think it's a happy coincidence that you have China. That's an easy target, politically speaking. You have an ambitious politician, and you have a drone company in the US that has investors on board. They want to see a return on their money. So you start lobbying, push out the competition, and pivot your offering to public safety agencies, defense, instead of consumer drones. And that's basically exactly what we've seen Skydio do.
Yeah, and you mentioned 90% of police departments fly DJIs. I'd say the other 10%, out of the 10%, 8 or 9% is Autel, and Skydio is maybe 0.5% based off of the 1,200 police departments that we interact with. So there's very few Skydio flights in our database.
And then when we say that the percentage of Chinese-made drones, whether it's DJI or Autel, among first responders is so high, that's only one side of the story, right? Because a lot of those first responder teams have limited budgets, and if you see how much drone you can get for your money, you're going to get either more drones or better drones from either DJI or Autel than if you were going to shop Skydio.
So I was going to say, it comes down to, it's reliable, right? It's effective, and it's cost effective, right? So it's safe. That's what I meant, safe. So it's reliable, safe, and it's cost effective. And you can't beat that, right? And it seems like a lot of these companies, and I get reached out, I get inboxed all the time on LinkedIn from people trying to, we want you to demo our drone, our software, this and that, and a lot of these companies, they think, hey, it's a government contract, right? But they got to remember that a federal government contract versus municipal or state, two different worlds, right? We don't have an endless budget. It's tough. Sometimes the purchase cycle can be a year, it could be 12 months, because you have to get all these approvals, you have to get the funding, and then then you're approved to purchase the equipment, right? So it takes a long time. It's a big investment. And, these companies, they're pricing stuff, way out of our reach, right? And then when you have a reliable, safe drone like any DJI platform, right? That's why everybody goes there, and that's why 90% of agencies are using that technology.
So I think my follow-up question on that is since we're talking about DFR and DAA, right? Those are the two topics for today. In the DFR Drone Act, the idea is to increase the tariff that we have a 25% tariff right now, which would increase to 50% plus $100 when you get to 2029. And then by 2030, no more ability to purchase a Chinese drone. So the full ban goes on into effect in 2030. The idea also is to collect the money from the tariff, that 25% that goes to 50%, and then give it back to public safety agencies, to agricultural drone users, and then to users that are doing surveys of critical infrastructures. And I think it's 60% for public safety responders. If this goes through, then Lewis, in theory, you'd be receiving grant money to purchase more expensive drones from companies, from American companies. Is that the solution? How does that help you? And I guess my follow-up question is, in 5 years, when DJI is no longer there, there's no more tariff to fund the money that you're getting. So in my eyes, you're going to be stuck with an expensive drone that you have to buy at full price without any subsidies from the government, and possibly not a budget to buy them. What do you say about that?
So a few weeks ago, I had an argument with someone that's within the drone space, and they were like, "Oh, but why are you complaining about the tariffs? Because it's just going to be money that then you would have access to buy equipment." And I said to him, like, who do you think is going to be paying these tariffs? You think DJI now is going to cut their drones by 20 to 30%, right? It's already an affordable drone, right? So now let's say an M30 that M30T, $10,000, right? You think they're going to sell it to you now for $7,000 to be like, hey, they're not going to do it. So for those first few years, every time I go purchase brand new DJI equipment, I'm going to be paying premium, right? It's still going to be cheaper than, a Skydio or a Brink, right? It's still going to be cheaper. So I'm still going to go purchase a DJI equipment. So I'm going to be funding that same fund, right? That then years from now, when I go use it to go buy this equipment. So it's going to be public safety. It's going to be everybody that's going to be purchasing DJI equipment for the next few years. They're the ones that are going to be funding those future purchases. So it's like I'm putting money in my savings account, right? So then a few years from now, I can tap into that savings account to go purchase a Skydio or a Brink drone. So we're gonna be funding that.
Yeah, and it's also a matter of product market fit as well. In terms of other drone companies, they haven't reached product market fit. That's why they're lobbying for it. If you look at DJI, they have drone prices, different pricing tiers for different drones. So I could see more public safety agencies just going for lower pricing tiers, getting the cheaper drones. Even with the tariff, it'd still be cheaper. If you look at Skydio or Brink, you just end up with one purchase, and it's going to be very expensive. There's no other tiers. There's no cheaper, more affordable tiers.
No, I was going to say, don't forget also all the added on expenses, right? When there's there are models based on subscriptions, right? So you're not only just buying the drone, right? So now if you want to live stream, you're going to have to pay this premium. If you want to do 3D modeling, right, you're going to have to pay this premium. So if you want the DFR software, you're going to have to pay this premium. So, it's going to be one purchase order, right? But it's going to be that recurring cost every year, right? That you didn't have before, right?
Yeah, and of course, the alternative to all of this is the NDAA ruling, the alternative to the DFR, which cuts down DJI drone almost immediately or within a year, which means no more tariff. So all of a sudden, pretty much overnight, you're going to be priced out of a market right now that you can maybe afford, maybe not, or you just right at the edge. All of a sudden, now you're going into 3 or 4 times the territory without any assistance from anyone because there's no tariff to pay for it.
Right, and even with that, right? So they deem the DJI drones are dangerous, right? They're a national security threat, right? So no more DJI drones in this country, right? So no more new equipment. All right, so are they trying to tell us that the next round of drones coming from DJI are going to be the threat? That's why we're stopping it. What's wrong with the current ones, right? So the current ones are not an issue to national security. Yeah. What about the drones that were approved by DOD and in the past, right? The Mavic 2 series was cleared, right, for operation. I think the Phantoms were too. So those weren't an issue.
And now they are.
The ones that we use now are not an issue. It's the future drones that are like. It's just. It's this thing is all over the place, and it just nobody can make sense out of it, and it sucks because it pisses me off. And if people that follow me on LinkedIn, they see my posts, I don't care. I'll call these people out. You know, they're, and I'm speaking as far as public safety, right? If I was in agriculture or filming TV, right? If you guys follow, I follow
education.
Right, education, right? I follow Beverly Hills Aerials on social, right? These guys do like everything from like NASCAR to NFL games, and if you look at the majority of the stuff they're using is DJI equipment, right? They use a lot of stuff that they do in-house, build in-house. That's another industry that's affected, right? So I speak from public safety, and I think that none of this makes any sense, and it's either these politicians just don't care. And it's, the lobbying is funding campaigns and making intros or whatever the case is. And we're the ones that are losing out, right? The end users are going to lose out because 2 greedy companies, that basically took money from a lot of people, and there hasn't been any return on that money, or probably getting pressured from their investors and all that other stuff. And now they need to produce. And instead of taking that money, we're talking about 10 years that they could have been taking all that investor money and perfecting their platforms, right? We had Brink a few years ago, right, with the Lemur. They're trying to sell this drone for $30,000 to public safety. When you looked at the drone, and the majority of the components were purchased on Amazon, from the sensors to, and they were trying to sell for $30,000. They didn't sell that much. I think they got a few federal sales and stuff, but it makes my head hurt when I think about this, because I'm like, who do we need to shake and knock some sense into that this is just makes no sense. It makes no sense. It needs to stop.
The one thing I want to point out that we spoke about, so a good drone for first responders has to be one that's affordable, has to be one that's capable, that's easy to fly, that's safe to fly. I think one component that gets often overlooked is the fact you also need to be able to buy them in large quantities, right? I mean, Adam Bry from Skydio, he was giving his testimony earlier this week, and he's like, yeah, we supplied 1,000 drones to Ukraine last year, whereas DJI, in his own words, supplied more than 100,000 drones. And that's the thing too, is like, we don't even have a drone industry yet. So yeah, you can maybe help and subsidize Skydio or Brink, but it doesn't mean you have all the suppliers in place the way they have in Shenzhen. So I don't even think it's realistic that we're going to have a drone industry in a matter of a few years, when basically we're starting from scratch here.
Yeah, and what happens if China and all of a sudden they say, you know what, we're not going to source any products, right? Oh. We all know that some of the Skydio batteries are made in China, right? They sourced a lot of their components from China. Yeah. What are they going to do if now they say, you know what, we're not going to supply the American drone industry anymore with any components? Yeah. What are they going to do?
As far as I know, there's still not a single blue SUES drone that does not contain anything that's made in China. So,
right. And listen, and I think we're talking about, these proposals, right, and all this other stuff. I think the correct thing to have been done from the beginning was like, all right, let's do a deep dive into the tech, figure out what the vulnerabilities are, if there's anything actually going back, which there has been. There's been third-party ones done, right? But I'm talking about like a legit federal agency doing it, right? And then develop, an app, right, or something where it completely cuts off DJI stuff, right? So you get to fly the equipment and you're just using it, not on the pilot app. It's not communicating with DJI. We all know, I think all their servers are all AWS servers anyway, right? So there's stuff here in the US. I think that should have been the first step. It shouldn't be like, let's just eliminate them, because it's just going to create more chaos than help us. I think that's the issue.
So I'm a proponent for DJI drones, staying legal in the United States. But I do want to correct you, Louis, on the AWS aspect. Yes, their servers are based in AWS, but you can still easily set up like a cron job to essentially send the logs or all the data over to China. So I just wanted to let everyone know that, so that we all have the facts straight.
I'd like to get your opinion on an article that I came across earlier today, so from a few days ago from 404 Media, and this journalist described it as this whole situation basically of banning DJI drones. He described it as a uniquely American clusterfuck, and basically his point is that when you look at a drone, it's basically the two components that cause the data security issues. One, it has a camera, and two, it's connected to the internet. Now, if you only talk about the camera, then you might as well talk about electric cars that have cameras, security cameras, cell phones. So that's not limited to drones at all. The part that made it a problem is that not only does it have a camera, but it's now connected to the internet. And what his point was is that the only reason these drones are connected to the internet to begin with is because DJI triggered or asked by the US government to do so, created geofencing and no-fly zones. And for that to work, you needed to have GPS information, obviously, but you also needed to connect to the internet so that you know where the drone was relative to a map that would say, oh, you can't fly next to this airport or next to this federal prison. So his point is like, it's a self-made cluster, because if we didn't require that, then we wouldn't have gone down that path. And now we're using that to ban these drones. And it's self-created in a way. So I'd like to get your opinion on that.
I agree 100%. Cluster, right? So, and then what other drones offer that geofencing, right? So they're actually the only company that makes it safe for people to fly the drone. So you get someone that goes out to Best Buy and buys a drone, buys a mini or something like that to send it up. Oh, I want to go fly it over a jail or over a courthouse or something like that. Guess what? They're not going to be able to do it, right? But if you get any other drone, right, even anything off of Amazon or something like that, you can send that drone up and fly wherever you want. So they go above and beyond, create that geofencing layer, right, to prevent people, right? So now the drone has to be online because it has to figure out where you're located, right? GPS, all that stuff. But now DJI drones are bad because, they can send data back to, so what are they going to send? The geofencing data back to China, and that's why they're bad? Like, and listen, I know people are probably going to leave comments on this video saying, oh my God, this guy is pro-China. Listen, I'm pro-tech. Okay. And I'm pro what's going to make my job easier, right? What I can use at work that's effective. I'm pro that, right? If I'm against companies like Skydio and Brink that with their shady tactics, right? If they would have just taken that money, right? All their investor money and just perfected their drone, right? Why did Skydio pull out of the consumer market, right? Because they're like, wait a minute, 90% of police departments in public safety departments in the US are using DJI drones, and they started seeing the dollars. Then they saw, nobody cared about DFR, right? Talking about the program, not the proposed bill, right? Nobody cared about DFR, 2-3 years ago, right? Nobody really cared about it. I remember even I was had conversation with people at DJI, and I'm like, DFR, that's where public safety is going to head in a few years. And they're like, no, everybody thought I was crazy, right? Well, guess what? Where's Skydio headed? Where's Brink headed? Right, and all of a sudden it's a DFR. And I'll go into elaborate a little bit on so Brink, part of Brink's sales pitch is now apparently, right. So they go out, they're trying to sell their DFR platform to certain agencies, is to discredit me and what we were doing in Elizabeth with DFR. So it's gotten back to me that in part of their sales pitch is, hey, what this guy's doing is not really. It's not really legal what they're doing with their DFR program. And so I'm like, dude, seriously, you guys are worried about little old me and Elizabeth, what I'm doing with DFR, right? You guys should be worrying about, all that money you took from your investors and how you're going to have to put money back in their pockets at some point, right? So it's sad. It's really sad. And now, listen, I call these guys out all the time. I think I just called them out today on my post for them to vote for me with my decade with DJI video. You know, Blake, if you're watching, please vote for me. My video, a decade with DJI. You know, all the great stuff I've been doing with the equipment. And Adam too, man. Just, you know, take a minute from your time and day and vote for my video.
If their competitors were at the same exact price point, the features available from DJI still outmatches all of their competitors. So it's not a matter of technology or pricing. It's not a matter of pricing. It's a matter of technology and the lack of for their competitors.
Yeah. So I want to switch over to, because I like what you said, Louis, regarding being pro-technology and making sure that you get the right technology that you need as a public safety agency. And I think a lot of people are asking for that. I don't think anybody on this panel is pro-China, anti-American UAS. I am not. I would like to see our own companies here do this. How do we get there? How do we get there without destroying the industry first, which is, in my opinion, what these bills are going to do, take us to the dark ages with really no time to catch up. Are we 5 years behind? Are we 10 years behind, assuming that DJI is going to continue making drones because they're a global company? They will continue making aircraft to sell to the rest of the world. By the way, we are the only ones that are banning DJI or planning to ban DJI in the US right now. So they'll continue making drones and innovating. What does it take, in your opinion? What do we need to do as a country to get US manufacturers, anyone who's interested in getting into the consumer drone and into the public safety market, to compete with the two current providers that we have, the two most popular that you've been naming? How do we do this?
I think it's just, you have to innovate, right? You have to, it's probably about 5 to 7 years behind, right, on the tech, right? Because like you said, DJI is not going to stop making drones, right? So we're always, if we compare whatever gets produced in the US to DJI, it's always going to be years behind, right? But if they get taken out of the equation now, right? So we're saying maybe 5 years behind. And that's 5 years behind if they're still able to source all the needed stuff they need from China, right? The sensors, all the stuff that they need to source from there, right? So if you take that out of the equation, that number might jump from 5 to 7 or even 10 years behind, right? Because now they're going to have to figure out where to source all this stuff from, right? I think the answer is just companies have to innovate, right? Instead of spending money on lobbying and all this other stuff, just build the product, invest into the tech, and make sure that it's a, you know, because what are they going to come out with? A drone that's going to have a payload with less capabilities than what we're used to, right? It's going to have to be, we're probably going to have to take a few steps back and adapt to the situation. And, you know, thermals might not be as good anymore. The zoom might not be as good anymore. The flight time, obstacle avoidance, all that stuff, right? We're going to have to realize that we're going to have to take a few steps back and get used to using equipment that's inferior to what we had. But I think the companies need to, you know, build a better drone, innovate. You know, there's other U.S. companies out there. You know, I'm not going to name any more, but they build drones, right? There's one that was competing that built a drone to compete against Brink, right, with a fraction of the money, right? And Duncan was able to do that, and Duncan is making pretty cool drones for the limited resources that he has. So if he can do it, and other companies can do it too. You know, it would be nice if, you know, we maybe saw other drones coming out of maybe Japan or something like that, right? Like, you know, we would think that their tech would be a little bit more advanced, right? But I think, yeah, great to make it. This my reply a little short of make innovation. That's what they need, just to innovate a little more.
I'm a little more pessimistic than you, Louis, in terms of how long it would take for the U.S. drone industry to catch up. I think the answer is never, instead of 10 years. 10 years. Because if we look at like a market comparable, assume that Apple, for instance, has to make all their devices in America. So all of a sudden, everyone at Foxconn that are paid 4 times, 5 times less than what an American worker would be paid, now they have to increase their prices just for manufacturing right there. So if they need to keep their margins, if they want to continue to appease their investors, they have to increase their prices as a result of that. Now, iPhones are now 4 times, 5 times more expensive. all of a sudden. So I think the same thing would happen here as well with the U.S. drone industry. One, you'd have to pay people a lot more money, but two, you have the issue of the demand. How do you fulfill that demand? It's not possible right now. Are you going to build chip factories here? That's going to be very, very expensive and also very, very time consuming. It would take 10 years just to build something similar to what TSMC has right now in Taiwan. So getting the chips, getting the components and everything all sourced in the US, I think it's a never issue. I think the drone industry will be far dead by the time it does come out.
But that takes it basically to another level, right? If you talk about spying and data security and photos and information being sent back to China, that's one thing. But if you look, for instance, at warfare as is going on in Ukraine, like you need to be able to either have access to drones or you need to be able to produce them yourself. And Ukraine initially got many drones through all kinds of constructions from DJI, not directly from DJI, but through middlemen. They're buying DJI drones. They've changed much more to building their own drones, FPV drones. If we as a country in the United States are still dependent on other countries to supply us with drones, then you have a much bigger issue than data security. If things ever go bad, we need to have our own drone security and not drone security, drone industry, I mean. Production. And I'm wondering if you think about the car industry back in, what was it, like the 70s and the 80s, where you have Honda and Toyota coming onto the market with like competitive products. Isn't that a very similar situation? And wouldn't the solution perhaps be that we force these companies to produce and hire and build these drones right here in the United States, just like what we did with Toyota back then?
And there's been conversations in the past where even like I believe with Autel, where Autel at one point I think was willing to move manufacturing into the U.S.
Yeah.
But there was still, even by doing that, there was still no guarantee that there would be Blue UAS, and so they were, imagine making that investment, moving manufacturing into the U.S. and then they say, nope, you're still not Blue UAS compliant, and you're not going to be able to be on the list. And why would they? That would be the perfect outcome, right? Would be, hey, move production into the U.S., make sure that nothing, gets leaked or whatever the case is, or all these paranoid people are complaining about, and just set up shop here, right? Why can't that be a solution? Even if we paid 15-20% more for a DJI product?
Well, I think the issue too is like DJI is a privately held company, so nobody really knows exactly who's funding what and what's going on and how it's been growing, right? We only have outside information. Then on top of it is in China, so we don't have a lot of information there either as to whether the government is subsidizing it, if so, how much. So you're a little in the dark. But what we do see is that if you look in America and you look at Brink and Skydio with investment money, that clearly doesn't work because their demands for return seem to be so high that those companies need to pivot. They can't survive in the consumer markets. Therefore, they go to a protected, high profit market, which is basically defense and first responders. Doesn't it make sense that we come up with a program where the government basically funds and allows us to kickstart the drone industry right here in the US, but has a much, much longer time horizon where they say we're committing to growing this industry for the next 20 years. And we're not going to put a knife on your throat and say we need returns in 2 years, 3 years from now. What do you guys think about something along those lines?
I think it'd still be too expensive. I mean, it's not just the hardware itself. We were only talking about the hardware, but partially of why people like DJI is because the software works very intuitively. It's very easy to fly a drone. Just the other day, I trained someone who's never flown a drone before to fly a DJI Avata. It's that simple, just to pick it up and start flying like that. That's not possible with a Brink, for instance, where when they're doing demos, they have their own pilots flying the drones. They don't even let end users try to fly it because it's that difficult. So it's a software issue as well, which means you also have to hire software developers in the United States, which cost 4 or 5 times more than software developers overseas. And now you've got this massive issue of, okay, suppose it's subsidized by the government. Suppose you have these factories here, but you still have to pay for the software developers. And at the end of the day, the drone's still going to cost 4 or 5 times more than what you see nowadays.
I know with the lemur, when you purchase the lemur, you would have to purchase like a training, so you would have to pay extra for them to come out and train you on the lemur. And I don't know if they're doing that now with their DFR platform. I'm probably venture to guess that they probably are doing it because they're so good at like these add-ons. It's kind of like you're at a supermarket and you're about to check out and you got all that stuff in front of you, like, you know, hey, let me get a pack of gum. Let me get this. Let me get that. It seems like they're doing that, right? Hey, you buy your drone, but now you have to get this. You have to get that. All these add-ons. But even to like Brink, when they and I tell this story to people all the time. I'm like, I remember years ago when the first Mini came out, right? The first Mini came out, and I was like, why doesn't DJI come out with an Enterprise Mini, right? Because you're talking about the Mini was like $1,700, even if they charged $1,500 or $2,000, and I would get the response, and I would say to every DJI employee I knew, I'd say, why aren't they making an Enterprise Mini? Oh, because you know they don't really see the need in it, this and that. You know what the need would have been if they would have done Enterprise drone? Brink probably wouldn't exist right now, because Brink they wouldn't have been able to sell their lemur to anybody if DJI hadn't just created an Enterprise Mini, put a thermal camera on it, some lights on it, or something like that. I don't think we'd be talking about Brink right now. Because
I think we've seen that with the DJI Avata as well, right? I mean, a lot of police departments have been using that as an indoor drone because it's super simple to fly and you can use it just like you described.
And Brink's been around for a while now, so like we hear like from early adopters of the Brink lemur, both the 1 and 2, say negative things about it because they've been exposed to DJI Avata. They did an A/B test comparing the two drones and at a fraction of cost that can perform better than a Brink lemur. Well, it's a no-brainer to choose DJI over Brink.
Right. Even like, not to pick on Brink that much, but even like the Loki, right? The Loki was another one. Like, you know, if you bought the Loki, you have to buy it in a set. So you'd have to buy 2 Lokis. And then there was some issues with the batteries where if you let the battery deplete all the way, that the battery the battery might not be able to charge again. You'd have to send the battery back. And these were drones that between the lemur and the Loki, they were the 2 purpose-built tactical drones, right? Indoor drones. Those 2 drones. And all I kept asking for is like, make an Enterprise Mini. That's it. That's all we asked for. You know, it already flies really good outside. Just give us a small little thermal sensor. And, you know, it could have been this. Remember when they came out with the Mavic 2 Advanced? No, it wasn't the Advanced. It was the Mavic 2 Thermal, where the thermal sensor was horrible outside, right? And that's why the Advanced came out right away. Like, if they had put that really bad thermal sensor that they had on that Mavic 2 Enterprise, if they would have put that on the Mini at the time, we would have been happy because it would have been indoors, so it would have been fine, right? But yeah, it's just, I wish they would have done it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about another issue that I think is under discussed, which is, and we had a discussion with Blake a couple of weeks ago from Brink regarding that same topic. And the question that I asked was, there were 2 questions that I thought his answers were really interesting. The first one was, would you prefer to get money from the government to help build this up, or would you prefer VC money? And his answer was VC money, because the government money is always attached to some what ifs, or you need to do this if you want to get the money. And it's difficult. I think really what he was trying to say, I'm not trying to put word in his mouth, but that money would be available to a ton of different companies that would now apply to become drone manufacturers because they think they can do a better job, and they would have a subsidy in order to do this. That's my first question. Is that the answer, to bring more people into this market, smaller companies that are going to try to compete, eventually consolidate, because we've seen that happen over time. A brand new industry brings a lot of players. Eventually these players die one after the other. Other companies become bigger, absorb them, and then become more competitive. Is that what we need to do in order to compete? And then I'm going to attach a question to that as well, which nobody is talking about, but there is currently no consumer drones available from American manufacturers. We've compiled a list of over 60 drone manufacturers in the US that are making drones. None of them are consumer drones. All of them are fixed wing, larger payload. And those drones are great. The performance and everything. I don't know how many they can build. We've talked about that, but there's no consumer drone. Nobody is interested in touching that consumer drone market. So how do we get, if we want to build up this industry, we need people to get into the consumer drone market so that they can compete on the enterprise drone market. How do we get there without government subsidies or other things? We have to be able to solve this. And I know, Bobby, you said we'll probably never get there, but there's got to be a solution. What's the answer?
I could start off with the beginning of your question about Blake choosing VC over government. You have to put yourself in his shoes. He is a fundraising wizard. He raised $70 million in a year and a half. That is an exorbitant amount of money for a company that was pre-product at the time. And then they released an alpha product just to demonstrate to police departments. So if I was in his shoes, of course I'd go with VC. I'd be able to raise way more money than government grants on that end. But you can see that even with this much money, if you're this well capitalized, and you still can't compete against the giants, even remotely compete against the giants, then how are, if we expanded this to 100 brinks or 1,000 brinks in the United States, how are they going to compete with the same amount of fundraising? I don't know. I don't think it's possible.
And what's going to happen if competitors start popping up? Are they going to get the same treatment that DJI got? Are they going to now come up with ways to eliminate competition? Like, it seems like they kind of partnered with each other and said, "Hey, let's do this," right? Because and then you got to worry about like other big names in public safety, right? Like Axon. What's Axon's play in this, right? Axon's an investor in Skydio, right? They dump money into them, right? Now all of a sudden, if you look at follow all the stuff, like you have Axon partnering with Skydio, right? So now the partnership, right? And I'm like, what happens with DroneSense, right? So Axon was pretty much back in DroneSense. I know those rumors that they were in the process of buying them, or they had bought them, or something like that. So now if Axon's partnering with Skydio, what happens with DroneSense, right? And all great guys at DroneSense, right? What happens to them, right? Because DroneSense, their business is all coming from what? DJI end users, right? Everything is DJI based, right? For DroneSense, the streaming platform, their DFR solution, it's all for DJI, right? So now we have to worry about does it mean that Axon's making a play to possibly purchase Skydio? Why is it all this sudden interest with Axon, shifting all these moving around like this, right? That's what we have to worry about too, right? It's not just Skydio and Brink. It's who's backing them, who's possibly looking into purchasing them. But yeah, I think they're probably gonna, once something comes up and becomes a threat to them, like what's going to happen with Enzu, right? Let's get rid of DJI, right? That's going to be their next target is going to be them, right? So because they're going to be like, wait a minute, if someone can go and source, basically source a drone from DJI and have it made in another country, we need to stop that too, right? Because they're going to see it as a threat.
I'm glad you brought it up. I had a different question, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Enzu Robotics, for both of you, do you see that what Randall's doing? I think it's very clever, very smart. It's very opportune to do that right now. Do you think that has any legs to take a DJI drone, license the whole thing, and basically build it somewhere else, give it another color, and then sell it as a non-DJI drone in the US?
I think it's a great solution. I like what Randall's doing. The fact that they have their own software, right? So it's their app, everything. So you're basically just buying all the parts and components and putting them together somewhere else. And I wonder what's going to be their claim, right? How are they going to come after Enzu, right? If they have their own software, right, that's operating the drone, right? Yeah. And what are they going to say that because you're now getting your drone parts or the components from DJI? What about all Skydio and Brink getting certain components from China? Isn't that the same thing? But I think that's a great solution. And who knows? Maybe that might be the answer in the future, Greg. If they are able to ban DJI in the US, are we going to see more of these partnerships between people licensing certain drones, right? Licensing the M30, the M350. Maybe somebody comes in and license, let's say hypothetically, Best Buy, right? Or Amazon. Let's say if Amazon now decides to license the Avata or the DJI Mini, right? And two really good consumer drones. And, how are these guys going to put a stop to that?
Well, Elise Stefanik responded right away that any company with ties to DJI would be banned just as much as DJI. So then the question is, okay, how would she even go about doing that when that company is run by Americans in America with only a production in Malaysia? But Bobby, what do you think? If you were a wealthy investor, would you put your money into Anzu Robotics right now? Or would you be like, I don't know, this might fly for a year and then maybe it gets shut down anyway?
I think it has legs. This also answers Greg's question on the solution. If there were 1,000 Brinks, each capitalized with $70 million, looking to monopolize the drone industry, I think they'd all go the Anzu Robotics route of licensing, essentially from DJI, and trying to be as covert as possible on what type of drone it is and where it's sourced. And then you're just going to have a bunch of drone companies that's just DJI, essentially, across the U.S.
Just different colors,
different
green,
color DJIs,
blue, yellow.
Yeah. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah,
I think in terms of Anzu, if I were to invest in them, I'd have to look at their competitive advantage, which is right now Randall's relationship with DJI. He's proposed this way back when, maybe 7-8 years ago, when he was still at FLIR, to essentially have like a branded drone that was run off the DroneSense app. So he teamed up with DroneSense, invested in DroneSense, FLIR invested in DroneSense, and they tried to essentially have like a white label DJI drone. So I think in terms of investment, if other companies, I don't know the details of his relationship with DJI, but if it's not an exclusive arrangement, then I wouldn't invest in them. If it is, then yeah, that investment has legs right there. But I think that's the solution to that's the solution that we've come up with to your question. But what do you think, Greg? What do you think would be the solution?
Well, there are two solutions. I think there's two options in my head. I'm still a proponent of trying to make this country be able to create our own drone. I do believe there's a potential threat to relying on any other country. It's China today. It could be a different country tomorrow. I do see the difficulty of competing with DJI. DJI is a $10 billion company. It's going to take a lot of investment. But I've also seen, I grew up in Europe, I've seen Airbus take over the market by having a government-backed investment and getting that company off the ground and competing with the giant Boeing in the US. So is it possible for us to do? I'm not a big fan of having the government involved in our lives more than it needs to be. Providing money to companies that really need to have an incentive to compete and to put that money to good use. I don't want to be handing off tens of millions of dollars to American drone manufacturers for them to do nothing except parties at a UVSI exponential, right? This is not what the money should be used for. But on the other hand, I do believe that the Anzu model was brilliant, quite frankly. When I first heard about it, I said, this is the answer. And you also have to keep in mind, DJI is a $10 billion company that's not going to not fight back. They're crafty. They're going to find a way to make this happen. If this bill goes through, they will find a way around it. We will still be able to use and buy DJI drones. By the way, you go to Canada, you'll be able to fly a drone. You go to Mexico, you'll be able to buy a DJI drone and fly it. So I think, I think there's going to be a lot more options than we think. People are going to get crafty to make it happen. If that's the best drone out there, it's still going to be flying here.
Oh, I was going to ask Greg a question. As far as like your customers, right? The Part 107 customers and the ones that do like the drone classes. Do you have a number of how many of them are actually flying DJI products, or if they're all doing
the vast majority? The vast majority. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, and the sad thing is, you look at the competition. Who are the other drones that they fly? And I think, Bobby, you mentioned this. The other 8-9% out of 10 is Autel And then even Autel has kind of given up on the consumer market, but the rest of them are Chinese companies. They're the cheaper version of DJI, which, by the way, under the DFR Act would be completely banned as well. It's not just a DJI thing. Autel would be banned. All the parts coming for these drones would be banned, so you can't do it. By the way, FPV builders that use any Chinese parts in the future in 2026 with the DFR Act, they can't do that anymore. You can't build drones. So, it's a lot more than public safety. And I'm not downplaying that this would have a bad effect on public safety, but this is really an attack on everyone that is flying drones.
That was the point I was trying to get to with the question. So it's going to affect Pilot Institute a lot if this passes. Yeah.
No doubt.
All of us.
Yeah, it's gonna affect, every single customer that we have on the drone side is definitely going to be affected with options for them to buy in the future. So, what do? They're not going to buy a Skydio because that's not a drone that's built for them. An X10 is not a drone that's built for somebody who flies an Air 3 today. Where's my Air 3? You know where it is? The Air 3 is the Spectre drone that we still don't know who is behind the Spectre company. There's been rumors that it's a DJI drone, a DJI employee that's gone rogue and stole the plans and is building, these drones outside the country. But that's the answer. That's what people are going to be flying. Another DJI drone that doesn't have a sticker on it.
Yeah. I think when we spoke to Randall, he mentioned that actually it was DJI that approached him. So I would imagine with the Air 3 situation, it's got to be something similar. I think DJI is pulling every trick out of their sleeve basically at this point to fight it. So anything they come up with, I think is what they're trying currently. Now, a lot of not just our conversation, but a lot of the conversations that have been taking place in the last couple of weeks around the DJI ban, they focus on, okay, once this ban is in place, these are all the consequences, and this is why it's a disaster for so many people in the drone industry. I would like to ask you, just talking about the threat of the ban, not even having the ban in place, but just talking about the possibility of a DJI ban, what's been the impact so far in the first responder world where people have to get budgets and get the money and get the funding and the training and then purchase the drones? Like, has there been an effect already with the ban not even being in effect yet?
I think some departments are going Autel only at this point. So they're just not purchasing DJI because city council is worried about it. So they just immediately go to the other Chinese alternative. That's it's not like they're going straight to Skydio or Brink to get those drones at all. And the ones that do have those drones, it's either a Skydio 2, like a consumer drone from 5-6 years ago, which they don't fly anymore, or they're forced to buy the Skydios due to state legislation. So it doesn't seem like even if they had to choose another drone, they're not going with the American drone companies.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Louis?
I was going to say, I think this has been going on probably for the last few years, because once the rumors started coming up about, China drones, the bans and them stealing information, all that stuff, you'd have public safety agencies that were going above and beyond and purchasing other equipment based on the rumors. And I can't even tell you the numbers of phone calls I would get from departments all over the country, to get my input on what they should purchase. And I would say, I'd be like, you're not a federal agency, so why are you not buying DJI? And their response would be like, well, because we heard that we couldn't purchase Chinese drones. And I'm like, well, has your state said you couldn't? No. So that was just them just going around, just spreading all those lies, the fear mongering, all that stuff. And you remember a lot of these people and even in public safety that are, the decision makers, right? The people that are purchasing, they don't know anything about drones. It's usually the end user, the guy at the bottom of the food chain that's the one that's pushing for the program. But then the decision makers, sometimes they don't know anything about the drone. So when they hear these rumors, or they hear another chief or something like that say, "Oh yeah, we can't buy Chinese drones because the federal government can't buy Chinese drones," and so that's been going on for years. I think now it's gotten a lot more traction because, there's all this attention, right? Now you have, these Congress people that, that are out there and they're vocal, even though they have no clue what drones do. Right. And, and I keep going back to her. Like, the fact that, you know, they hire the lobbying firm in December, and 2 months later she comes up with this. She had no time to even investigate and figure out if this was true. Like, how
she has no idea. Yeah.
No, and if listen, I'm not too far, but if public safety agencies in New York should get together and they should, this woman, obviously, if she does this for drone technology, what does she do for everything else? Like, you know, like obviously she's not doing any research into the fact.
Would this have happened in the same way if this was not an election year, you think?
You know, probably not, right? Because she's trying to get her name out there, right? She wants to probably, you know, be appointed to some sort of cabinet position with and she's like, oh, you know, China bad, you know, I don't like China, no drones, no Chinese drones in the U.S. And all of a sudden she thinks she's going to get somebody's attention. She's a junior congresswoman or something, right? And isn't that why even like what's the other congressman, Tester, that got involved, right? Is because the rumor was that she didn't have the right influence in D.C. to get this through, or it was poorly. Yeah,
he's a senator, so he's
right. Right. So they went to Tester, and like, because apparently he had more muscle in D.C. and, you know, hey, you know, and hopefully we can make some sort of connection like we did with her, you know. But I think Skydio and Brink might have, you know, hid their tracks a little bit better with Tester, but it's got to be they have the same MO, so I wouldn't be surprised.
So a few years ago, DJI launched the government edition, or was it the Matrice 200? I think they developed that together with the Department of the Interior, I think it was. Then they had the local data mode. Now they said, okay, you can't even upload anything anymore. Like, we're just going to cut it all off and basically get these drones air-gapped, if you will. Have you guys had any experience with any of these solutions? And would you vouch for that is in fact a safe way of flying a DJI drone and eliminating the risk of any data going abroad? Or do you think that's still not?
I think it's easy to pen test it with Wireshark. I'm not a pen tester. I'm not a security researcher either. I do have a software background, and, you know, I've used Wireshark in the past, so you can see what's in and out of any device. Basically, it's really robust. It's been around for like 20 years, and it's used widely. So it wouldn't be too hard to verify whether or not data goes in or out of a drone itself. Have I personally done it? No, I have not.
So I'll speak as far as what we do. Like our DFR program, obviously, you know, we're using DJI drones, but we're operating on Paladin's DFR platform. So everything is, other than, you know, when you turn on the drone, the controller's on. After that, the RC doesn't have to be on anymore. Everything's done through Paladin's software. Our patrol drones, majority of the times we're using DroneSense, right? So, but they are local data only. Everything's set up that way. And we're not doing it because we're paranoid about our data, right? If China wants to see us, you know, chasing some crackheads around or something like that, they're more than welcome to see it. But it's not. For us, it hasn't been a huge concern, but we do operate in that manner. But yeah, for a lot of people, you know, they're so concerned about it that I don't. You know, at that point, don't even operate a drone if you're that paranoid about it.
It's such a mess because all of this is just a reflection of poor go-to-market strategy. If you look at Skydio, they have like 3 customers in public safety. They got Chula Vista, they got Oklahoma City, and they got NYPD, and that's it. So, you know, what happened to the people that approved of those purchases? Fritz got hired. The trainer from Oklahoma City got hired by Skydio. The detective from New York City got hired by Skydio. It's not a scalable go-to-market strategy at all. They were trying to get the big cities and then try to hope that other agencies would go for it. So after they hired them and did demos, it turns out the tech speaks for itself. It's just not good enough. So that's why they weren't able to grow that way. That's why we're in this situation right now. It's just a matter of poor tech.
Yeah, look at you mentioned it, Bobby. So Skydio, they did that big play with NYPD, right? All that marketing, they had all these interviews and stuff like that. Have you guys noticed the last few like stories that have been leaked, you know, about success stories in New York? What drones are they using, right? Even like there was the one on the beaches, right? It's M30s, right? There was like the building collapsed. It was an M30 in the picture, right? So it's kind of like, these guys,
they're all DJI drones,
right? All DJI drones, right? It's sad, right? But that's what goes back to the point of like, it's like mismanaged funds, right? Instead of them perfecting their drones, they're spending all this money on like, let's onboard these departments, and then we can, put all this marketing out, spend all this money on it, and then they're still using DJI drones, right? And that money could have been better served if they just, built a better product and priced it at,
I also want to mention Skydio didn't start off lobbying against DJI. They started off trying to compete normally by building a good product at a good price point. It was only until some sort of tipping point, I don't know when they realized it'd actually be more economical for us to just ban our competitors than to beat them in tech, like basically every other company out there.
I think I would guess the investment companies behind Skydio would have forced that switch, because like you say, Skydio wasn't going to survive in the consumer drone market. And when you look at Skydio and you compare that to GoPro, for instance, GoPro had much deeper pockets and was arguably much better equipped to enter the consumer drone market. And they didn't make it either, because apparently it's pretty damn hard to make a consumer drone and that flies well and that's affordable. And I think you're right that, Skydio changed course because they weren't going to make it otherwise.
Right. And you could see how long they, how long they started this play, right? Because if you look at that employee that we talked about that came from her cabinet, right? He was hired by Skydio, I think, like a year ago, right? So why would Skydio go hire this guy that's working for, a junior, congresswoman, right? Like, it's one thing if it was somebody, right? So that's how long they've been thinking about this play. It's like, we'll go hire this guy, we'll give it some time, then we'll get in the door, we'll get the lobbyists in New York, and then we'll get her on board, right? Because that was, they waited a whole year for that, right? They were kind of like coming up with that plan for a while.
Many episodes of the PiXL Drone Show ago, we tried to get Chula Vista on the show, and Fritz Reber was one of the people at the time at Chula Vista, and he ended up with Skydio as well. So if you start looking into it, there's a whole lot of close relationships between police departments, Skydio, lobbyists, and then you make the jump into the political world.
Of course. But we have to be, but us end users have to be okay with all that, right?
For full disclosure, Lewis is a Skybrowse customer. Elizabeth PD is a Skybrowse customer, and Lewis is not on, nor is anybody from Elizabeth PD on Skybrowse's payroll. We did it the old-fashioned way by doing a demonstration and showing that the product is better than our competitors. So that's why we have more customers than Skydio on the public safety side.
Yeah, and let's also mention we're not on DJI's payroll either, right? I don't want people to think that, right?
But it would be nice for you to get some prizes if they chose you as the DJI top 10. Give them the shout out. Vote for him. Please vote for my video, right? Yeah. Then they're gonna say, look, DJI's giving them free drones, right? Like, if you vote for me and I win it fair and square, they can't say that DJI's giving me free drones. Yep.
Hopefully this episode comes out before the contest is over, so people can go on and vote for me.
Apart from voting for your video, Lewis, what can people do to make a difference? Like even with this ban being halfway through the legislative process, like what can people do who fly drones, who are watching this video or listening to the podcast and are just upset as we are? What can people do to make a difference here?
I think outreach is the best, right? Go to the Drone Advocacy Alliance, right? There's a lot of good information there. They make it fairly easy for you to reach out to your state representatives. I think we've all been doing that for the last few weeks. I think there's been a lot of outreach, but I want to believe that it's making a difference. But if you see how easily these politicians are swayed into going in different directions, it's almost like is it really going to make a difference? But definitely, I think just keep doing the outreach. At some point, we'll get in somebody's ear that will hear the end users and will even do their due diligence, right? I know somebody briefly mentioned it, like all these people that go into Washington to testify, right, on all these special panels or whatever, right? Have you guys seen the trend, right? It's none of them are end users, right? It's either the CEOs of these companies that are trying to push DJI out, or it's their buddies and people that started shifting already towards anti-DJI that used to be DJI supporters. These are the people that are going to Washington and testifying, right? How come no actual end users are there, right? It baffles me how, this is all happening and there's really nothing, we can do this outreach, but hopefully it works. But I don't know.
Last year in Florida, this was in March, there was a Senate committee meeting, and they had a whole bunch of first responders from the state of Florida talking about their use of drones, their use of DJI drones, their use of American-made drones, and the issues they ran into. And it was fascinating to listen to first responders who actually have flown these drones and used them in work environments, and to hear their feedback. And it was, what you would expect, basically. That's DJI drones are still hard.
So let's do a grassroots movement.
Right, and then even
everybody call your congressional staffer. Make sure to talk to the staffer, because at the end of the day, the Congress people, they're getting pulled in so many directions. They just end up listening to whatever their staffer's saying. So if you can get into their ears, we can make it happen.
So even what happened in Florida, right? So in Florida, they had all those good testimonies, right, from public safety, the end users, right? That all the success stories, all that stuff, right? And it just goes to show you that their lobbying efforts were they invested so much into their lobbying efforts that even having public safety there, basically begging and telling these people that we need these drones work, right? Still didn't work out for Florida, right? And it's a shame because, these are the people that they should be hearing from, and they didn't believe them. Like, it's sad, very sad.
Oh, Skydio was called out. They were accused of pimping. The guy who was there at the committee hearing was accused of pimping for Skydio to push Skydio as a Blue SUS drone into Florida at the expense of DJI drones.
Yep.
But, yeah. Greg, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't think so. I think this has been great information. I think we need to continue letting people know what is going on, and I think getting all the opinions out there, and we got to find solutions. It's good to talk about the issues. We have to find solutions and see how we move forward. But if anybody who's a decision maker in making policies, don't destroy this industry. Don't destroy this industry. Taking DJI out will not solve anything that you want to accomplish. It's not even going to help Skydio and the other ones that are putting money into this. It's not going to help them. So yeah, that's my plea.
Maybe we can get more first responders on the PiXL Drone Show talking about their experiences flying drones, so that people actually hear what those stories are like.
Yep, and I'd like to get more American manufacturers as well on the show. Maybe we have a panel where we can talk to smaller manufacturers and see what they need to succeed, and maybe if they echo what Bobby was saying regarding, maybe this is an uphill battle that we just can't climb right now, or to do it, we need this and this and this and this, because we need to hear from them. They're the ones that we're looking after to make this happen. And if these bills pass, they're the ones that are going to have to carry the boulder over the hill. So, yeah.
I don't think we've ever had Skydio on the show, but I can't reach out to Adam because I think he blocked me. So, Adam, if you're listening, you'd be more than welcome to come on the show. That'd be an interesting conversation for sure. Bobby and Lewis, do you guys have anything that you want to say to wrap up the show as we're coming to an end? I think it's been an hour at this point, so I don't want to take up too much of your time.
I've actually been saying that to Bobby for a while. On that little podcast that we do every once in a while, I'm like, we need to have Blake and Adam on. Those guys will never come on. At least probably with me, they won't. Or they'll probably have somebody else from the company come on, but I doubt it. They don't want to be called out. They don't want to have to explain it. Everything that they do is very controlled, right? All their interviews, a lot of that stuff that they do, that's all marketing that they're paying for, right? So you don't see them in a setting where they could be called out. They have to do explaining. They'll never put themselves in that situation. And, and I just, listen, like Greg was saying, if anybody's watching this that, obviously is a decision maker, or I just asked, just hear from the end users, public safety, all these other industries that are going to be impacted by this ban. Just come out, talk to these people, see their program, see what it's all about, see how, how the equipment operates, and, make your own decision. Just don't go based off of what the lobbyists are telling you and what this whole fear mongering stuff is about. And I'd just like to end with this. I just hope that Blake and Adam, they don't. I just recently bought a Polestar, and it's an electric car that's tied to Volvo, but it's made in China. I hope that they don't try to take my Polestar away from me too, right? I hope it's one thing taking my DJI away from me, but please don't take my Polestar away from me.
He loves his cars.
Bobby,
I'll just also talk a little bit on Lewis's comment on Adam or Blake coming on a podcast with him. It's also at a conference I think last year. We were at a private training session with all public safety. The Oklahoma rep that was paid to get Skydio into Oklahoma City PD. He was there doing the training, and one of our team members asked him, "So, what's your thoughts on the current political situation in Florida?" So he was called out publicly in front of a bunch of public safety agencies, and he basically gave a non-answer saying, "Oh, I'm just here for training. I don't know anything else about that." And I think the same thing would happen for anyone that you do get on this show. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but as a parting word, support DJI. It's the benefits of keeping DJI significantly outweigh banning DJI, and Skybrowse is always making updates because of DJI, because of these fantastic, quick, rapid, good technology drone manufacturers. In fact, we just released an update today with a new interior mapping and faster loading. So now everything's so much snappier and faster, and you got smaller file sizes for your Skybrowse models. Available now. Check it out. www.skybrowse.com. Yeah. Skybrowse spelled SKYEBROWSE. Make sure to have the...
Wow, shameless plug.
We'll put a link in the description.
Subscribe and follow.
Down below, exactly. Greg, do you have any final words? Drone Alliance, maybe?
Well, I'll definitely go to the Drone Advocacy Alliance, which is a website designed to help you reach your closest representative, whether they're representative or senators, and keep track of those bills. And I know people say it's one-sided, but the website really is designed to provide information. You can reach your representative with whatever you want to say. If you want to say that you're pro build, then you can do that from the website. The website doesn't stop you from doing that. It's there to help you reach out to your representative and do your civic duty of saying that you don't agree with something. So it may not be as effective as you think, as effective as I might think, but it's at least an avenue that we have right now. We need to use it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you for everything that you shared today on the PiXL Drone Show. For all the people that are either watching this on YouTube or listening on a podcast platform, please do like and subscribe and share this podcast. Growing the audience definitely helps us to keep this show on the road. Thanks again, and I'm sure we're going to be back soon, probably with another episode about DJI bands. So there's more to come. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.